On? Okay. I'm going to send the sign-in sheet around. Please keep it moving. Last time, about half of you never got it because it got stuck somewhere, so keep it moving. Everybody have a good fall break? Yeah, it's nice to be back? No, of course not. So we're going to have this session with our guest speaker. She's going to introduce herself. And then afterwards, we're going to take a 5-minute bathroom break. And then Cliff Roski, he's one of our faculty members. Are you teaching next semester? Are you teaching one else? Criminal law. Some of you will have him for criminal law. He is going to take us through a mindfulness session. So it's not required. If you want to get up and leave, that's fine. If you want to get up and come back, that's even better. So that will be at the end of this. So Martha, it's all yours.
Hi. What's up? It's really nice to be here. My name is Martha Knutson, and in the fall of 1996, I was a 1L law student. I was in your shoes. And preparing to come and speak with you today, I've been trying to remember exactly what that was like. And if I remember correctly, it is like somebody came in and turned your whole brain and your world a little bit upside down. I remember coming into my first semester of law school and having always done really well with school and never having a problem staying at the top of my class. And then suddenly, it's like the self-doubt starts coming on. What am I? Maybe I'm just not as smart as I think I am, and my parents have just been lying to me all these years. And so that self-doubt and then not really knowing how to study, reading a case would take forever. I remember sitting there with a case, my case book, and a law dictionary. And does anybody ever feel that way? It's like trying to learn a new language. And then you hear your classmates talking about different areas of the law or answering questions in class, and sometimes they'd be like, I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, is there something wrong with me? So all those kinds of things come up, this whole new world. You've got your friends and family that are out living your best life, and they don't get while you're studying all the time. So first semester, there is a lot of stress and pressure and uncertainty. But the good news is I made it through, and I went on and had a career. I practiced for 18 years. For the first 10 years of my practice, I was a litigator at a private law firm where I became a shareholder. And the rest of my time practicing law, I was general counsel for a national real estate management company. So for most of the time, I really enjoyed my practice. But as time went on, I became more and more burned out in what I was doing. That bled into not just my practice and my ability to engage with my practice, but it also bled into my life. And for the first time, I was anxious a lot and depressed and just kind of walking around like a sad sack. So I decided to see if there was a way that you could love your career, engage with your career, and love your life. And I realized that for most of my career, I had this idea that you could either do well in your career or you could be well in your life, that it was a choice. In my research into myself, like all good research is me search, I came across the study of positive psychology. Positive psychology is the study of human flourishing. So traditionally, psychology, up until about 30 years ago, psychology was primarily focused on getting rid of the things we don't want, on disease, on pathology, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, all those things. That research still continues and it's incredibly important. But what clinicians and researchers found is that even if you can get rid of those things, the absence of disease does not equate with human flourishing. So, I'm getting overstock.com notices. So positive psychology was a call to researchers to look to see what are those elements of our life that can take us from neutral to like a positive 10, and can we develop those in people? And what I found during my studies was that doing well actually drives being well. I'd given myself a false choice. Doing well is correlated to the things that we want: performance, engagement with work, job and life satisfaction, better health, better memory, and it also buffers against the things that we don't want. It buffers against depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and substance abuse. So I took myself back to school, and I went and got a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania. And now my job is to work with lawyers, legal organizations, and other business professionals on how to flourish in life and at work. So the reason I tell you all of this is so you understand that I know what it's like to be where you are. I understand what it's like to face the stress and pressures of law school and the profession. And I believe, and I think the science supports, that lawyers and law students deserve to thrive. You deserve to thrive in your studies and in your future career and still have something left to engage with the other parts of your life. So the key is paying attention to your resilience. So, let's see if I can get the clicker to work. What is resilience? Resilience is about the way that we handle the stress and challenges of a full life. So I say a full life. What I mean by that is resilience and well-being in a full life is not the absence of hard things. Sometimes it sounds great to not have any stress in our lives, right? But think about if you didn't have any stress. You wouldn't have the things in your life that matter the most to you: family, friends, career, the things that you're going after with school. All those things come along with stress. A full life, stress is bound up in that. And so our working definition of stress today is stress is what happens when something that you care about is at risk. Does resilience matter? Yes. Studies have shown us that people that are higher in resilience are better able to tolerate stress and uncertainty, increase performance at work and at school, even when IQ is controlled for, faster recovery when you hit a setback, physically and mentally stronger, healthier, and more successful. And again, it buffers against the things that we want to avoid: anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and PTSD. So in the positive psychology world, when we talk about resilience, we're really talking about the skills and the processes that resilient people use to adapt to stress. So they either don't create stress where it doesn't need to be, they don't take stress that's about this big and blow it up into something huge. They can meet very difficult challenges and get through it, and then they can recover quickly. So we think of these skills and processes like resources, something that we have and can use. Anytime we meet a stressful situation, we all do this, and we're usually not even aware we're doing it. We start to scan the demands and the risk of the situation, and we start to look at what kind of resources do we have to make it so can I either meet this challenge, do I have what it takes, or not? If that assessment, you think you have what it takes to meet the challenge, you're going to hit that with a lot more resilience than if you don't. So it's really about your feeling or your perception of the kind of control that you have. So resilient folks tend to have a combination of many of these different resources. And they use these different resources to meet the challenges and the stresses that they have in their life. So first, the bad news. In the research that we have on lawyers kind of suck at being resilient. The studies that we have show that, so if you're looking at a percentile, like from 0 to 100th percentile, most of the general public falls around the 50% mark in resilience. Lawyers fall around 30%. And more telling is the distribution. 90% of the lawyers that have been studied in this way fall below the 50% mark. So we've got a little bit of work to do. But the good news is resilience can be taught. and very effectively. The United States military has actually taken a resilience program in-house where they teach they take usually a non-commissioned officer and they put him in through a 10-day resilience training program where they teach him a lot of the things that are up here. They focus heavily on realistic optimism, flexible and accurate thinking, mindset, meanings and values, social support, problem solving. And some of this stuff sounds pretty fluffy, but we've studied what happens when these new resilience trained officers go back to their platoons. And the platoons that have one person that's been trained in these things, because their job is to train the other ones, they have much lower rates of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and these are folks that are in combat zones. So it can be learned. And if you're looking up at this stuff here, you can see a lot of them have to do with our thinking. Thoughts are very powerful, and resilient people think differently about stress. So today, we're going to focus primarily on stress mindset. So mindsets, there are beliefs about the world. Now, this slide was supposed to have lots of eyeglasses on it, but didn't work out that way, I guess. But you can think about mindsets like glasses. And so anything that we think of in the world, we're seeing it through glasses. And a lot of times we don't even realize that we're wearing a certain set of glasses to look at the world. We can have mindsets about a lot of things. So for example, aging. We all have beliefs about aging. Intelligence. We have beliefs about our intelligence and about whether can we improve our intelligence. We have beliefs about that. We have beliefs about whether or not we belong. We can also have mindsets about stress. So let's look at what your mindset about stress is right now. So take a minute and think about how you think about stress. When somebody says, oh, I'm stressed, or if you're thinking about you being stressed, what goes through your mind? Is it more positive or is it more negative? More negative? What about the messages about stress that you give each other? It's like, yes, you're stressed. Or is it, oh man, you're so stressed. Right. So what do you say to them?
It'll get better. Try to inspire them somehow, even though it's not
It's not illusory. We're going to get to that. Okay. But think about the messages you get from the media. I mean, if you just Google stress, you're probably going to get like the top 10 reasons that stress is going to kill you. And like, oh my God. So, all right. So, sounds like a lot of you tend to be, raise your hands. Who tends to think of it stress as harmful and should be avoided or reduced or managed? Okay. How about those that think that it's helpful and beneficial? Cool. We got some of those. Not as many. All right. Well, certainly the national data that we see on lawyers tends to correspond with stress as harmful. Lawyers tend to have higher rates of depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and those things are all correlated with stress. Stress is certainly correlated to negative outcomes. So all those of you in here that think of stress as super negative, you're not wrong. It's correlated with death, depression, anxiety, faster aging, suicide, heart disease, right? But here's the thing. It's also correlated to all these beneficial outcomes. Improved relationships, better memory, better immune system, faster brain processing, sharpened hearing, improved performance, longevity, more fuel for your brain and muscles, increased compassion, better relationships, increased well-being, and it's cardioprotective. So how do we make sense of this? And could the way that you're sitting in your chairs right now thinking about stress have anything to do with it? In 1998, there was a national health survey that was sent out to almost 30,000 people in the United States. And the survey participants were asked a ton of questions about their health. But amongst the questions that they were asked about their health, they were asked these two questions. How much stress have you experienced in the last year? And do you believe that stress is harmful to your health? And then the researchers follow these folks for 10 years plus, and then they see who dies. They go check the records and they see who dies. And no, psychology is so cool. But, and this is what they found. High levels of stress increase the risk of dying by 43%. Like, shit, that's scary, right? But this increased risk applied only to the people who also put down that they believed that stress was harmful to their health. So, those reporting high levels of stress, same as those people that died, but who did not see stress as harmful, had the lowest risk of death of anybody in the study, even those folks that said that they had very little stress in their life. So can mindset really be that powerful? Well, the science of mindset says yes. And this is an area of study that has blown up, and there's all sorts of different mindsets that have been researched. But one quick example is longevity. People that have a positive view of aging live 7.6 years longer. Now, that gets to be really telling when you look at the protective factors for aging well, exercise, not smoking, all that kind of stuff. That only gives you 4 more years. So there's something to this mindset stuff. So mindsets work, it's kind of like flipping a lever in your brain. If you change your belief, you're going to change your thoughts. And if you change your thoughts, you change your emotions, you change your actions, and it snowballs over time. And we've seen even little small changes in mindset can change the way that people interact with their world. For example, voting. In one study, an election was coming up, and one group of people were asked, how important is it to you to vote in this election? The other group was asked, how important is it to you to be a voter in this election? The people that were asked about being a voter, they voted 3 times more than the people that were asked, how important is it to vote? People want to think of themselves as a voter. That's just one other small little example. So, can change thoughts, emotions, actions, behaviors, but our mindset can also change our physiological response. And there's a pair of really cool studies that started looking at this. One of them was a group of researchers went into like 4 different hotels. And they were looking at the housekeeping staff because they had higher rates of obesity, problems with their health, and they wanted to see if they could make a change with that. So one group, they took the control group and they just put up posters about what the Surgeon General's recommendations were for exercising and every single day. And then they gave a little presentation, 20-minute presentation saying, these are the kinds of things you should be doing to exercise. You need 20 minutes a day, blah, blah, blah. The other group had a 20-minute intervention, and they were told, hey, look, the stuff that you do every single day is exercise. When you vacuum, you are using these muscles. When you do this, you're burning this many calories. And then about 3 months later, they went in and they looked. And the control group was just about the same in terms of their health. But the group that got the intervention, they had lost weight, they were healthier, they were less stressed, they were less anxious, they reported liking their jobs better, and they had less sick days. And they didn't do anything else different. It was just their mindset about that. Another study was done with a group of participants. They were brought into the lab, and they were hooked up to all these machines, and they were told that they were going to test a shake. What the researchers were measuring is ghrelin, and it's a hormone that tells us if we're full or not. If it drops, you feel full. So week 1, everybody goes in, they're told, okay, you are going to drink this shake. It is called the Decadence that you deserve. It is 680 calories and 30 grams of fat. Drink the shake, measure the ghrelin. Week later, they come back. You're going to do another shake taste test. They're told this shake is sensible satisfaction, guilt-free pleasure, or something like that. And they're told it has 180 calories and no fat. Drink the shake, measure the ghrelin. So it turns out that they were the exact same shake. But when the people thought that, hey, I'm drinking this full-fat, heavy-calorie shake, their ghrelin levels dropped 3 times more than in the Sensi shake. So does this just mean that you can sit on the couch and tell yourself that you're exercising and, then lose weight that way? No. The theory is if we have more than one possible outcome, the way we think about something is going to make whatever outcome more probable or less probable. And it works with stress. So to understand that, we're going to take a minute and understand the stress response better. Fundamentally, stress is a biological state that improves our physical and mental functioning to meet the demands of survival so we can learn from it so we can be better the next time. So stress is an adaptive process. You can think of them as basically 3 stages. The initial physiological arousal, the certain stress response you have, and then recovery. So your initial arousal, your brain perceives the stimulus, your adrenaline starts going. You'll feel your heart rate increasing, you might breathe more, you might get like that buzzing in your chest. Then stress hormones are released. And the main ones to be concerned about are, to understand, are cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone that helps your body process sugar and fat and use it as energy. It also helps with your immune system in the short term. And DHEA, which is a neurosteroid. It helps your brain to grow. These stress hormones are neither bad nor good. It's just really the ratio between the two that matters, which we refer to as the growth index. And that changes depending on the kind of stress response you have. So there are 3 primary stress responses. One is the threat response. This is your typical caveman stuff, like your fight or flight. What happens when you're in that place? It feels the same. You get like that rush of adrenaline. Your heart rate goes faster. But in the threat state, your blood vessels are constricting. And that's to send energy out to your extremities so you can get ready to fight or run away. And also, if your blood vessels are constricted, you're not going to bleed as fast or as easily because your body really it's expecting to be hurt. In the threat response, you also have a low growth index, which means you have a ton of cortisol and not a lot of DHEA. And this is important because you stay in stress longer in the threat state. Recovery is much slower. And so prolonged levels of high cortisol over time are associated with cardiovascular disease, increased aging, worse memory. So I talked about recovery. You stay in stress longer when you're in a threat response. When you're in a threat response, you have more of a retreat orientation. And that means that you want to withdraw, you're more attuned to threats, and you want to run away and stay away. Makes sense if you are running away from a tiger and you're a caveman, right? You want to be attuned to threats, like is the tiger still out there? And you want to get away as fast as you can. But it's not the best play if you are dealing with the challenges of your first year of law school. So when you have this retreat orientation, you're staying in stress longer because you keep scanning for that tiger. And that makes it so you are noticing all the negative, potentially stressful things that are out there. And you know how it is. If you want to be worried about something, you're going to find something to worry about. And also wanting to withdraw and not be around other people, that keeps you in stress longer and deprives you of one of our best antidotes to stress, which is oxytocin. You can think of oxytocin as an antidote. It calms us, it balances us, gives us empathy, and it dampens your psychological response. And I think most importantly to know about the threat response is, remember how we said the the stress response is adaptive? So your brain and body is learning. And if you're in the threat response, you are learning to be more sensitive to stress, more reactive to stress, and stay in it longer. That's the threat response. The next response is the challenge response, and this is your classic, like, rise to the occasion response. So have you ever had to stand up and speak or go take a test and, like, stress helped you to rise to the challenge? That's the challenge response. So it's going to feel very similar to the threat response. The sympathetic nervous system engages, but in the challenge stress response, your blood vessels stay open. Your heart beats stronger and gets more oxygenated blood to your brain, so you have a more concentrated, focused attention. And then when you have the stress hormones get released, cortisol and DHEA, it's a high growth index, which means that you have a high rate of DHEA in connection with the cortisol. And DHEA aids in faster recovery, it reduces inflammation, and it balances out your nervous system. When you're in the challenge response, you also have more of an approach orientation to stress recovery. So that means you're going to recover faster. You're going to want to be more, or you're going to be more likely to seek out your friends, to call your mom, to go seek feedback from a professor if you are in a challenge response. And then as you do those kinds of things, the oxytocin gets flowing. You're also learning. Like in the threat response, you learn to be more susceptible to stress and more reactive. In the challenge response, you actually become more inoculated to stress. What happens is that the DHEA increases your neuroplasticity. And so you're getting rewired to make you better at the stress that you just experienced. And it burns the connection between the prefrontal cortex, where that dampens fear and increases your positive motivation. So you're burning that pathway, you're recovering faster, and so you're getting better at that kind of stress. So when it happens the next time, you have a higher threshold before you hit like a buzzy stress response. So the third response, stress response, is one that's really related to recovery. We've touched on it before. It's called Tend and Befriend. And that is when you're stressed, you reach out to somebody else. You reach out for connection. And that's how you get all of that oxytocin benefit in that stress response, which is blended in very much with the challenge response. But here's the thing about oxytocin. It's released in all of our stress responses, but it gets used very quickly. So we have to keep triggering that to get the benefit of oxytocin. So when does one of these happen over the other? Could be situational. I mean, you could really be getting chased by a tiger. It could be genetic. We all have a genetic predisposition to a certain response. It could be your life history. Like kids that have had a life-threatening disease when they were younger, they were taken care of by family, they tend to have a tend and befriend response. That's based on, because your body learns and adapts, right? But also our beliefs about stress can play a big part, because remember, stress is adaptive, and what we do while we're in stress teaches our body and brain to do it again the next time. But the cool thing is, we can change it. So there was a study done not too long ago where folks were brought into the lab, and they were divided into two groups. One group was shown a 3-minute video with like all the doom music and the scary stuff and saying stress is going to kill you and all the things that are scary. And then another group, they get a 3-minute priming video that shows them stress is enhancing and it helps you perform and all the good things about stress. So then these two groups, they have to go through mock job interviews where they go in front of a panel, and the panel just makes it really awful for them. And while they're doing this, their stress response is measured, their growth index is measured. Now with both groups, everybody's cortisol went up, so everybody was stressed. But the folks that had the 3-minute priming video saying that stress is enhancing, they were in the classic challenge response. The folks that had stress is debilitating, they were in the threat response. And remember that threat response, when you're not recovering as fast, that's what's linked to all that chronic stress. If you have it over time, that's what's linked to all the bad outcomes. So just having that 3-minute priming video changed people's physiological response to stress. So what about in the real world? It's a lab, right? But what about the real world? Well, at the height of the 2008 financial collapse, a study was done of a group of financial workers, like this international, like finance people in this international firm. And just a little bit of context, people in finance have been followed for a long time, and after 10 years, about 100% of people working in finance have one or more of the symptoms of burnout. So it is a high-pressure environment, very similar to the way the practice of law can be. So in any event, these folks, again, were divided into two groups, control and the intervention group. The intervention group got the stresses enhancing priming, the same thing, 3-minute video. And they followed them, and they found that the folks that had that intervention, they had lower levels of stress, anxiety, depression. They were more productive. They had less absences, less physical illnesses. And this is regardless of their coping mechanisms or the amount of stress that they were under. Your stress response can also impact how you're going to perform. So your exams are coming up, so I would imagine that's somewhere in the back of everybody's mind. Yes? Oh, yeah, thank you. Sorry. Or is that better? Oh, sweet. Okay. So the stress response that you're in will impact your performance. Another study that was done, people were brought into the lab, divided into three groups. One group gets scientific articles about how bad stress is, one gets scientific articles about how great stress is, and one gets to just play video games. And then they go through what's called the social stress test. And this is, it's a pretty stressful test. You have to go in and you get 5 minutes to prepare to give an oral presentation. Then you have to go out and do it without notes in front of a panel that's trained to make you feel like crap about yourself. Like, they're just like, oh, you shouldn't have said that. Like, give you all the facial expressions and that. And then after you do that, then they make you do math. You have to subtract, like, by sevens from 966 or something. And so everybody's stressed out. And then they have objective measures. They like have behavioral people watching, and then they measure recovery. So the people that got the stress is challenging intervention, they outperformed anybody else in the study. They had the classic challenge response. They outperformed everybody, and they recovered much quicker just from that small change in their mindset. So what about the real world? And this, I think, is relevant to you folks with exams coming up. A bunch of students preparing for the GRE were given, they had, again, one control group, one intervention group, and they were in a room just like this, about to take a practice GRE. And right before they took it, the professor read this. People think that feeling anxious while taking a test will make them do poorly. However, recent research suggests that stress doesn't hurt performance on these tests and can even help. People who feel anxious during a test might actually do better. This means that you shouldn't feel concerned if you do feel anxious while taking today's test. If you find yourself feeling anxious, simply remind yourself that your stress could be helping you to do well. That's it. That's all they said. The people that got that paragraph, they outperformed the people that didn't, by far. And the cool thing is, 3 months later, when they actually took the real GRE, they outperformed them again. So maybe that just helped them to calm down. Is that possible? That just calming down, that's what you should do? Seems like that makes sense to me, but no. The GRE group that was given the intervention actually showed higher levels of stress than than the others. They were just in the classic challenge state. And study after study shows that trying to calm yourself down in those situations actually doesn't help. First of all, most of the time it doesn't even work, right? You're kind of trying to calm yourself down, you can't. But also, you have this energy, use it. Students from middle school all the way through graduate school get better GPAs and do better on their tests when they have a higher stress response. Doctors who see anxiety as helpful, they have less levels of burnout and they're less frustrated by their work. And in training exercises, federal law enforcement officers are less likely to shoot the hostage when they have higher levels, like they're in the challenge response. But that only happens for people that have a positive stress is enhancing mindset. And those folks that have those mindsets tend to have better health, improved performance, and more life satisfaction and career satisfaction. But what about just avoiding it, right? Like, we haven't talked about that. Why don't you just kind of avoid the stress? First of all, it almost always backfires. My biggest avoidance tactic is procrastination, and procrastination always ends up making things worse. But there's another study, it's a longitudinal study where, again, you follow people for 10 years, see who dies, who gets sick, whatever. And at the beginning of the study, they asked how people coped with stress. And the people that said they coped with stress just by avoiding the stressful situation, the avoidance predicted increases in depression, in being fired from your job, and getting divorced, and all the bad things you don't want in your life beyond any symptoms or difficulties that were there when they first started. So the cost of avoidance, I think that has a lot to do with missed opportunities. Right? If you're trying to avoid something that might be stressful, you're missing an opportunity. You might try to avoid it by doing something self-destructive, abusing alcohol, drugs. And you might be limiting your future by not going after something or challenging yourself because it's going to be stressful. So I'm not telling you all of this to say, hey, bring on all the stress because we're going to be superheroes. Like, let's pile it on. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm trying to point out to you is that none of us are neutral about stress. Your mindset is already at work every single day in what you're facing. And it's influencing your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, and your physiological state when you are facing challenges. So the stance that you take towards stress matters in your resilience, it matters in your reactions to stress and how reactive you are to it. Now, a negative, like the harmful effects of stress, all the things that you don't want, are more likely to happen if you have beliefs around one of these three things. That stress overwhelms your ability to cope, that it isolates you from others, or that you feel like the situation is meaningless. So we're going to walk through these three things and talk about some stuff that you can do to be more resilient to stress during your first year. So remember, when we're stressed, we all do that scanning. What's the demands of the situation? What are my resources? Am I up to the challenge? So when you're doing this, something that you can all do now, you can do it in your head, you can talk to each other about it, you can go step out when you have some time and write about it, is to think about what are the things that I have right now that can help me meet this challenge. And remember, stress is one of them. Stress can be a resource. We talked about other performance and all those things. So this is an intervention that's been really helpful in getting people to shift their stress mindset and to feel like you have more control in the situation. So sit down with a piece of paper and write about what are your strengths, resources, and strategies that you've used to cope when something difficult happened in the past. And think about, did the energy help you? And did it make you stronger? And can you bring that to bear on your current challenge? So one thing for all of you to think about is what kind of resources do you have right now with this first semester of law school? Okay? Number one, you did something right because you're sitting here. You got into a very competitive law school. So you know how to study. You're intelligent. You have people in your life that you can turn to when things are hard. You have, there are resources at the school. Those are resources. They can be psychosocial resources, which is a lot of what we focus on in positive psychology, but they can also be resources like tutors. They could be resources that the law school offers you. They can be your instructors, your professors, each other. So just sitting down and identifying those resources to yourself helps you when you meet that challenge and you do that subconscious scanning. So remember oxytocin and how important that is to dampen your psychological response to stress and to recover quickly. So social support and positive relationships, they are huge. You can be the strongest little fish in the fishbowl, but if your fishbowl is dirty, if the community you're around is negative all the time, if you are not interacting with others, you're eventually going to go belly up. So lower levels of stress are perceived in research when people they perceive that they're supported, they perceive that they have somebody to turn to for help, and they feel like they belong. So what are the things that you can do to help you get that oxytocin bump and to take advantage of this really important resilience resource? One of them is pro-social behavior. And I'm not saying like walk around all day long and volunteer all your time or all your money or anything like that. I'm talking about little small acts of helping somebody around you. There's a study of about 1,000 people that they were followed over 3 years, and each year they were asked about the stressful events in their life, and they were also asked about their pro-social behavior, like how much did they lend a hand to others. And then after the 3 years, they looked at what had happened to these people. So folks that did not engage in any pro-social behavior, all their stressful events predicted worse health, worse performance, bad things with school and work. The folks that engaged in pro-social behavior, they didn't have that same correlation at all. It didn't seem to affect them. So I'm talking about things like 5-minute favors. Everybody has 5 minutes that you can go and lend a hand to one of your classmates or somebody else in your life. Show some support. And I remember how much your first year of law school, you feel like you don't have any time. Like I felt guilty for going to get groceries sometimes. I was a freak show, but so you feel this time scarcity. But the really interesting thing is if you take the time to help somebody else, research shows that your perception of time actually seems to expand. They did this at Wharton. They took all these stressed out MBA students and they carved out time. On one of the groups, they said, you have this windfall of time, you can go use it however you want. The other group was told, with this amount of time, you have to go help somebody else. The people that helped somebody else were less stressed. They did better in school, and they felt like they had more time. So, pro-social behavior. Also building high-quality connections. And with this, I'm not talking about making everybody in the room your best buddy. I mean, you certainly can, but I'm talking about those little micro moments of connection that you have every single day with people. Make eye contact when you walk down the hall. Say hello, learn each other's names. Just those little moments of interaction make a huge difference. Remember the fishbowl, keeps the fishbowl clean. And then there's physical touch, brings the oxytocin on, and I will just leave that there. I don't think I need to explain that. Finding meaning in your challenges. So connecting the challenges and stress in your life with meaning is correlated with increased well-being, engagement, lowered depression, anxiety, and lowered perception of stress and better health. In a 50-year-long study, people that viewed the daily things that they had to deal with in their life as hassles, they died at a rate of 5 times those people that looked at the things that they had to deal with on a daily basis as connected to something that they cared about or that were valuable. So this here is a list of, this is not exhaustive. It's just to give you an idea of all sorts of different values that are out there. And there's an exercise that you can do with this that's been done with students. And it's been replicated in all sorts of other different contexts. So you take, you look at a list like this. Like, you can get online and Google values and meaning, and different lists will pop up. You pick 3 of them. And they need to be ones that are personally meaningful. Either you feel like it's a strength for you, or it's aspirational, but it has to be something that you emotionally resonate with, not something you think you should do. Then you can just do this one time. Doing this one time has lasting impact. You describe why the value is important to you. You write about it, how you express it in your everyday life, including whatever you had to do today. And if you're facing difficulties or a challenge, write about how it might help you. Anybody think of an example they want to share? Oh, I feel like I could do the law professor thing and call on you guys, but that would not be, I've never been able to do that.
Here's one right here.
Yes.
Gratitude.
Yes. Say more about that.
For me, it's
That's awesome. There is a ton of great research around gratitude and being able to handle stress. Yes? Oh, yeah. Okay. He was talking about gratitude, having gratitude for the people that are in his life, the support that they give him, and like how they've made his life better. Did I sum that up correctly? Yeah. I bet those people in your life sometimes stress you out, don't they? Yeah, right? But they make your life better? Yeah, because stress goes hand in hand with the things that we care about. So, overall, remember that the stress response is adaptive. So what you are all doing every single day is teaching your brain and your body to handle stress in a certain way. So the best time to actually teach your brain and body what to do is when you're actually in stress. So this is something you can do that's been studied and replicated and works right in the moment that you're in stress. It's a 3-step process. So, number 1, notice it. Acknowledge that you're in stress. Hey, I'm like, my heart's beating faster. I'm feeling those feelings like, oh, my palms are cold or sweaty or whatever happens to you, like, I'm stressed. And then just acknowledging that you're stressed actually changes the location of where you're dealing with it in your brain, from a reactive place to one that is more proactive, and you can deal with it. Then you welcome stress. Stress. Hey, this is because it's something I care about. This is my body helping me to meet this challenge. And when I say it's something that you care about, this is a good time to connect into those values. Like, okay, I'm stressed about this because I care about learning, or I'm stressed about the situation because I care about this person in my life. So you identify what it is that the stress is connected to you, that's important to you, and then you reframe it. You reframe thinking like, I'm stressed because I care about this. It also could be a signal on that second step that I'm stressed and this isn't connected to something I care about or a value of mine. Why am I engaging in this particular situation? Sometimes the situations are unavoidable, but sometimes you can choose to withdraw at that point. And then you use it. Instead of using all the energy you get from stress to try to get rid of the stress and avoid the situation, engage with it. Use that stress that your body is giving you to have the energy to get the challenge completed. So at the end of the day, resilience isn't about being untouched by stress. It's not about having a life that's easy. Well-being and resilience is about noticing that the things that we care about most in this life do come with a certain amount of stress. It's about recognizing that the way that we think about stress, the way that we approach our challenges, really impacts how we're going to interact with those. And these small little changes can lead to an upward trajectory over time or a downward trajectory. For example, if people that tend to be more neutral about stress or choose to see stress as helpful, they tend to move towards challenging situations instead of avoiding them. So if you move towards a challenge, you're going to get better at it. You're going to increase your confidence. And then you're going to want to move towards the next challenge or engage in the next relationship. And so that leads you upward, and that's going to impact your career, it's going to impact your life, and it's going to impact your well-being. Conversely, if something stressful comes up and you're like, oh, I feel negative about this, I'm like scary, I don't think I can meet the challenge, then you're not going to take those challenges and you're not going to take those steps forward. And over time, that's going to impact you as well. So I will leave you with one last study. Gallup did a poll of 131 countries, and they looked at the stress index in the countries, and they looked at the well-being index in different countries and well-being measures. And they found that the countries with the highest well-being also seem to have the highest levels of reported stress. And they were defining stress, again, as something that happens when something you care about is at stake. So you can't avoid all the stress that's happening to you right now as a first year, but you can control your beliefs about how you're going to engage with it. And by starting to change your mindset about your beliefs, you can start to make stress be a resource for you. So if anybody has any questions, thank you.
Hey, 5-minute break. Come back if you want to do the mindfulness thing with Professor Robinson.